Hi, this is Ruth Theresa with One Inspiring Woman, and today I'm answering a Dear Ruth Theresa question. Hi, my name is Ruth Theresa with One Inspiring Woman. I'm an intuitive psychic medium here in the Sugar Land area. That's just outside of Houston. I work with my angels and guides to assist my clients in many areas of their lives, to bring them special messages from loved ones who have passed, to dialogue with their angels for guidance into their own situation, or to assist them with their own psychic abilities. If you like my content, please make sure to subscribe, like, and comment. That's a question. So when I got this question, I was like, wow, this is a really interesting question because I haven't ever been asked this one before. So I'm always like, this is interesting. But it's kind of like, how do the four elements? A lot of times people will say, they're a fire sign, or they're an earth sign, or they're a water sign, or they're an air sign. And kind of what does that mean, and explain it. How does it really define us, or how does it give us a definition of somebody else? Like, what is it going to tell us about someone else? And I thought, wow, this is a really great question. I have never thought of it this way. I was like, interesting. So a lot of times people in astrology will use the four signs as a guide: fire, earth, water, and air. And so kind of it's really an interesting understanding of like, how do each of these elements reflect us, and how we communicate with other people, or how do we communicate with our partner? How do we deal with everyday life things that come up? So I thought that was a really kind of an interesting question. I was like, this is really interesting, right? So it's kind of really one of those, we have kind of somewhat a mixture of unique elements, and wisdom kind of gleans a little bit towards kind of like the natural elements. And so this is kind of something that you will find in healing practices, not only in Chinese healing practices, Native American, Tibetan cultures, and others. You'll see kind of them doing it kind of to what is your element. Where do you kind of like your energy lie in this? So one of the things that I will say is they were usually talking about your sun sign, kind of like, are you an Aries? Well, an Aries is a fire sign. Or are you a Taurus? That's an earth sign. Gemini is an air sign. Cancer is a water sign. So it's kind of like interesting, like thinking about these in like a much different way than we would normally do it, can kind of give us an idea of the elements that kind of make up that person's kind of like sun sign. So it's kind of like further explanation. Each of these unique constellations of kind of like the elements manifest in distinct ways in different areas of our lives. You may be fiery when you're challenged at work, but really grounding when something is going on with your health. Or you may be kind of like very intellectually airy, so you're kind of like always mentally in your head, but you may be very empathetic towards other people, which is kind of be more like a water sign. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors kind of lived really in close contact with our earth, our hearth, kind of like our connection to earth, and how we kind of like draw that back into our energy. And it's one of those, it kind of really independently kind of like, how do we react in different areas? These are the four elements today that really kind of bring up like, how do we thrive? How do we survive in our lives? And I don't mean like, how do you survive and go kill an animal? What I mean is like, what are your thoughts, or how do you work through something? Are you going through your fiery kind of like, let me fight everything? Or is it kind of more like, let me bring my emotions into this, that water sign? So it's kind of like, how are we dealing with different things? Our building blocks of who we are and how we deal with things can change, but it can also change according to our settings of kind of like, how do we deal with normally with life? How do we normally deal with conflict? How do we normally deal with things? And this is kind of an understanding deeper of ourselves. So we kind of tend to have the four elements to start out with, kind of balance our nature. And it's one of those, if you're kind of really fiery, you really kind of need a ground to kind of of balance those two out. If you're kind of too much in your head and not enough in your heart, then you need to balance those two. So how you balance these opposite energies are really important, not only for you, but the people around you as well. When we think of Earth, we think grounded and centered. We're kind of thinking like, how does someone work through an issue or a problem or something that's going on? Like, how are they solving that problem? That's like an air sign. How are they connected to that? People that are kind of like in their emotions, kind of open-hearted, kind of like that energy is more that water, that emotional sign. And people that are creative are usually considered to be fiery. They're coming up with like instant answers. They're usually the snarky ones that kind of give you those snarky responses to things. You're like, whoa, thanks for the information, but you kind of didn't need to zap me at the same time. So kind of how they deal with that is kind of that energy. And we each have different ones depending on kind of where our sun sign is. That's the one that we're going to go back to over and over again. Now we all have to balance all of them in different ways. So if you're really a fire sign, you really may need to open up to your emotions a little bit more and kind of like, how is the other person going to take the energy that I'm telling them or the information that I'm telling them? Someone who's like an air sign may not even think about anything. Like they're just very logical, like this, and this, like everything is in its box, that sort of thing. And it's one of those, but if they connect to their creative, that fire sign, now they're thinking outside the box. Kind of an interesting way to think about things and to think about people. Our culture, we've kind of gotten away from kind of like understanding. We understand like, oh, that's a Sagittarius and that person's going to be fiery energy. And that's okay, but it doesn't tell you anything else. It's just kind of putting everybody into different boxes. Like you belong in this box, you belong in this box. But I will tell you, there are reasons why to kind of really think about each person. Because a lot of times people say, oh, all cancers are like that. No, not all cancers are like that. They have similar ways of dealing with things, but they will be different in the way they kind of like bring it out or kind of like get that into the flow. So that's what you really need to think about. Is kind of like they do have some similarities, but they also have a lot of differences as well. And opening up to the differences is what's going to give you that insight into what you're dealing with. And I think it's kind of like a fun way to kind of bring this kind of like old information into a new way. I do believe that a lot of people that are just kind of like, oh, they're a Virgo or they're a Leo or whatever else, and they kind of put everybody in that same box, are really not opening up to as much information as there could be in just getting to know that person. One of the things, our elements are kind of truly our way to kind of simplify and kind of balance our energy. The way we relate to other people, how we balance other people's energy is always really important. And I will say it's one of those, like, it does take some time to consider and really think about each person. Like, this is similar energy to the other person that I know that is a Cancer, yet they do this differently or they do this differently, because everybody has like a different way of working through the energy. Now that we've talked about kind of the basics, or the really, really basics of kind of the elements, let's go into a little bit more and kind of like categorize now our 12 signs. It's one of those, so kind of our fire signs are going to be our Aries, our Leos, and our Sagittarius. And they're going to be focused on very dynamic energy, very bold, very creative. And one of those people that come up with like, where'd you come up with that solution? They're going to be like out of the box, kind of crazy, like things are going to work. Their ideas will usually work, but it's kind of like, where'd you come up with that? Kind of like, oh my gosh, that's interesting how they came up with it. And they also love those different perspectives. Next, let's go into our earth signs, which are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And these are all about body sensations. They're going to want clothing that's soft or smooth or lumpy or bumpy. They're going to go into that sensual side of it. They're going to be into like slow movement, kind of easygoing, kind of very earthy, colors or tones, and they're going to be, I don't want to say slow, because it's one of those, they like to slow down the energy. When they're really connecting with someone, they want the energy or that time to almost stop. Like, I just want everything to stop and just be in this moment, be in the feeling of it, the sensations of it. So it's kind of like, wow. Our air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, and these are all about kind of like sharing different ideas. It's one of those, it is all about different perspectives, and what is your perspective if compared to theirs, and how are we going to find the solution, kind of like working together mentally, bringing these shared ideas together. It's one of those, our air signs are like love being open, and they love being out in open spaces. They don't like being confined a lot. The last one is kind of like our water signs, and this is Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And these are all about focused on our feelings. How do you feel about this? The tenderness of this, the compassion or the passion with this. And they're typically going to be overall kind of like bringing in their energy or their compassion to everything that they do. Even if you're like, that has nothing to do with what your compassion should be, they're going to be bringing it. And there's really not any definitely like, oh my gosh, combinations that are good or 100% bad. But these are kind of some ways to kind of think about, like, how do you deal with these? And this can kind of give you insight when you're trying to find a mate, but it can also give you some insight into your friends and your family. If you're a fire sign and they're an earth sign, like, how do we work this out? How do we get this to get together on the same page? Or if you're an earth sign and they're an air sign, like, how do we work that out? So I'm going to give you kind of some pros and cons of kind of like how to work these relationships a little bit better, or kind of give you a little bit of insight. So if we have fire sign and fire sign, these are going to be, they love to argue, and they love to kind of like that, like collaboration of coming up with different ideas, or what about this, or what do you think about this? Sometimes they can be a little bit, explosive with their energy. They're kind of like, wait, I need to tell you all about this. And you're like, oh my gosh. They can also be a little bit mean, and it's not necessarily, they don't feel like they're being mean, or if you ask them about it, they'd be like, I'm not being mean. It's just one of the other signs may take them. But when you have two fire signs together, it's one of those, you're going to be almost having two people that talk the same language of both being very sarcastic. They speak the same sarcastic language, and they're going to be coming up with things, and you're like, wow, that's a little harsh if you're on the outside of it. But to them, a lot of times, like, it is like, wow, they love this connection with each other. But usually when you have a connection between two fire signs, usually that's going to burn out pretty quickly. It's not going to stay together. So you may have that relationship like get tight and then kind of move apart and then kind of come back together. So it's just kind of like the way it moves together. So if we were to have a sign where we had like two earth signs together, what would that be like? Kind of like two earth signs. So if we had two earth signs, that would be like very slow, very reliable, very touchy-feely kind of energy, very grounding, very like sensual, like this feels good, I love the motion, I like this, and they're going to want to stay in that. But a lot of times for someone else, it may be feeling like we're kind of stuck in the mud, like we're kind of stuck in the same energy, and there may be no variety, because it's like two earth signs are going to be kind of like, we just want this easy going and we like the sensation of it. But then you kind of feel after a while like, okay, we're not going anywhere, this isn't moving, or there's no variety in this. That can be a little crazy in that area. Now, what if we got two air signs together? This is kind of like super positive, a lot of high flying possibilities with this. Kind of, kind of like two people that really stay in their head and very stuck in their logic thinking. And sometimes that logic thinking kind of really blocks out their heart. They're going to be like logically thinking about things, but it's one of those, they're not really connecting on a heart level with anything or each other. And so that may make both of them feel distant at times. So that can be like, okay, we were really together and now we're pulling apart. If you were to have two water signs together, you're going to have a lot of emotions going through the flow and the energy of things, but I guarantee you eventually you're going to have a meltdown, because it's one of those, one is going to want to be soothed more than the other, and it's not going to work out well. That emotional balance is not going to be there for them. And a lot of times when you have two water signs together, they're going to be feeling overwhelmed in their feelings, in creating kind of like not being able to move forward in energy. So it's going to be kind of like, okay, we thought we were moving around, but now it's like we're just stuck in that energy. And they're going to be feeling so much energy and so many feelings that a lot of times they really are stuck together in some interesting ways. So let's go into putting our fire signs with earth signs, and how does that work out together? A lot of times what you come up with, kind of this warmth and this compassion, this real reliability together. There's going to be a lot of practicality, because that earth sign is going to bring a lot of that practicality. But it's one of those, you're going to have to work to keep the balance of kind of like smothering out the fire sign, or kind of like scorching the earth, because sometimes like that fire energy is going to be like, okay, I feel like all you're doing is trying to make me feel things all the time. I'm just feeling this, but it's one of those, like, I want to like express myself and I want to push energy out. And so you're going to have like this pushy conflict with each other. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that you're going to have to find that balance between like scorching earth and kind of like snuffing out that fire. So it's kind of like allowing that to come in together. Kind of the next big one is like fire and air signs. This can be very thrilling. It can feel like a lot of motion when you first get together. There's going to be a lot of dynamic energy in flow, because you've got that fire of like, just let's be in motion, and then that air of let's think about it, and let's think about it as the next step comes up, and let's think about it. And usually a lot of times like you get a lot of over promising and under delivering in this area, because it's one of those, if the air sign is like, oh yeah, we can do this, but that fire sign is like, wait, we can't do this. And so we've got to balance that kind of like that, those promises with kind of like our enthusiasm to move forward. So it's one of those, that fire sign is going to be like, let's go, and the air sign is kind of like, hey, let's think about it again. So we got to really work on that one. Kind of an interesting mix of them. Let's go into kind of like fire and water, which we think is like completely, totally opposite. But this really kind of is really a great balance to each other. You have like usually a great chemistry, kind of like bringing in like a heat and a passion, and then you've got this cooling water energy kind of come in and kind of like soften things out. But you're really going to have to work hard to kind of keep the fire going and the water flowing, because a lot of times that fire energy is like, let's be in motion, and the water energy is going to be kind of like, let's be compassionate and let's calm things down. So finding the balance between two of them is not hard, but it will be a balancing act that has to be balanced quite often. What if we were to have like an earth and an air sign? So if we had an earth sign, we would have a lot of imagination. Earth people just love kind of like that easygoing, like let's clear this out, kind of with that romantic side, like the air. I love to be in love, the feeling of things. And you're going to be bursting a lot of like energy of like, how do we not be overcritical? How do we kind of calm this out? Because that air sign can be a little overcritical at times if it's not balanced with the right energy. And I guarantee you that air sign loves talking about things, and that earth sign just likes being in the energy. So sometimes we're going to get to that over talking stage, and sometimes it's going to be like, okay, we're not kind of really talking about our expectations or what we should be doing at this time frame. So it's going to be kind of a balancing act. Let's go into having like earth and water together. This seems like it'd be a great combination. It can be at times. This is kind of like people looking for that emotional connection or that emotional understanding with other people. But that water sign is going to be kind of like, you're not speaking my language, and like where your boundaries are not really set, like kind of like water is kind of like doesn't really have a boundary. It's going to take over wherever possible, and so it may feel like that earth feels like it's being taken over by the water sign, and then it may feel like it's going back and forth. And a lot of times, like communication with the two, you have to be careful about getting on the same page or making sure you're talking about one subject at a time. It makes it much easier. So it's kind of like, how do we do that? Let's go to kind of our next one is kind of our last one is kind of like air and water signs together. This is going to be a highly sensitive but also very nurturing one at the same time. Highly sensitive being the water, that soft energy, but that air, that thinking, that the conversations of being nurturing and easygoing. Kind of what you're going to have to worry about is kind of like difficult situations or disagreements. It's one of those, sometimes it can be a little bit harder, especially if you're not on the same page or in the same area. It's one of those, you're going to have a lot of miscommunications if you're not really thinking about things. This can also, excuse me, air signs can come in with like, I've already got all the answers. I've already figured this out. So you're going to have to balance that. Like, I already have a solution to, let's hear your side of it. So that maybe feel like we need to balance this energy a little bit more, and not drowning out our emotion side of it, but not drowning out our thinking about it side. So we're kind of really balancing our thinking and our action planets a little bit better. Let's do some angel cards, and let's get us a little bit deeper insight. Hopefully this gives you a little bit more insight into your relationships with different signs. This one is our first sign card that's coming forward, and this is playfulness. In all of these connections, you are going to have to work on your playfulness. Connecting with each other is different, and how do you connect to this person that's a fire sign compared to different people that you've had in your life that are fire signs? That's a great way to think about it, instead of like all fire signs are the same. Like, how am I going to connect to this one compared to the ones in the past? Miracles. It doesn't take miracles to make a relationship last or to work together, but it does take time and effort. And sometimes that can seem like a miracle. But I will tell you, one of the fun things about this is really thinking about, how do I communicate with the other person? And are we on the same page? Are we coming to the same understanding, or are we not? Doesn't mean like we need to agree on everything, but having an idea of like, yes, we're on the same page can really help with this. Manifestations. A lot of times it's great to have someone who is manifesting, someone who has or thinks about things differently than you do. Opposites do attract. When we have different types of energies, it can bring like a flow or an energy, kind of like fire, to our relationships in a way that we haven't really had in the past. So that can be like, wow, really interesting with this. Body care. Make sure that you feel like you're being heard in these relationships as much as you're hearing the other side. That is something that's really important, I think, in every relationship, no matter who it's with or what's going on. Really thinking about this, am I being heard? Are they being heard? Are we being heard together? I think that is a very special one, and kind of bringing up some new ways of communication with each other. How do we make sure that we're always on the same page? My last card for us is blessings. When you are in a relationship relationship, no matter who it's with, what sign they are, or anything else. The blessing is that you're in a relationship, and this could be friends, partners, family members, whatever it is, co-workers even, making sure that you're showing this as a blessing. Your ideas are different from mine, and that's going to make us a stronger group, or a better group together, because we think about things differently instead of like everybody's the same, everybody has to be the same all the time. That's no fun. Everybody wants to have that person they're going to be different with, or kind of like being able to be themselves with, but also be appreciated for who they are and what they bring to the table. I thank you so much for joining me today, and I know that we'll be talking again soon.